and welcome to the podcast that would much rather nod one home from a corner than score a goal from open play. It's the big man up top.
Yes, it is. We love Arsenal and their set-piece routines.
Yes.
I never thought I'd ever say that.
No, do you think they need an open play coach?
Maybe. There's a lot of chat about Arsenal basically being Stoke 2.0.
Yeah, what do you think about that?
Arsenal just play good football. They also just happen to be good at set-pieces. Stoke just never played good football.
Turgid.
No, it was effective football.
Very effective. Ed, what are we talking about today?
Yeah, today we are going to touch on the issue of Marc Guéhi and the rainbow armband.
Yeah, big one.
I know.
I'm nervous, Ed. I won't lie to you.
We are, because it is a topic that we want to cover well. Yeah. And so I think when we started this podcast, I think we thought, oh yeah, we'll touch on topics like this. We didn't actually consider the implications of it. So hopefully we are not cancelled by next week.
Yes, please be gracious.
We've done 18 episodes of this. It's been a good run.
It's been a good run. It has.
I think also at this point, Joe, I think it is really important for us to touch on the Michail Antonio story.
Yeah, so if you missed this, West Ham put out a statement on Saturday night that Michail Antonio has been involved in quite a serious car crash.
Yeah.
They also put a statement out on Sunday just to say that he's in a stable condition. So obviously our thoughts and prayers go to him and to his family as he continues to recover.
Yeah, absolutely. We wish him all the best, and yeah, hopefully we will see him playing back in the Premier League very soon.
Yes.
Okay, Joe, it's time for Bible Ballers.
Gosh, we're going straight in this weekend.
Well, yeah, I think so. I think we've got to, haven't we?
We might have to.
We might have to. For those of you who are new to the podcast, this is Bible Ballers, which is Guess the Player with a Difference. So I'm going to ask Joe a question. He's got to guess the name of the footballer that I'm talking about, but this player will share his first name with the name of a book in the Bible. How are you feeling?
Yeah, I'm feeling confident today, Ed. Just before we start, do you think we're better at football knowledge or Bible knowledge?
Well, I think we're quite poor on both.
Yeah, because you had a message this week, didn't you?
Yes, I had a message from my friend Graham. You might remember the famous Peter incident.
Of course.
Where I...
Petergate.
Yes, exactly. Forgot that there was a book in the Bible called Peter. Graham was one of the people who got in touch and said something to the effect of sacked in the morning.
Like Pep Guardiola.
Exactly. Graham also got in touch because in the last episode, there was chat about whether there was a book of Joseph.
Was that you that said that on me?
I honestly can't remember.
I think it was you. Yeah.
Now, I will add, I do know that there isn't a book of Joseph.
We could pin it on Samuel Ball, to be fair.
We could. I think that it was more to asking the question, is there a book of Joseph?
It's just all part of the chat, Graham.
All part of the chat, Graham.
It's what we do.
What I would say, though, is that it is very difficult in the heat of the moment, isn't it?
Look, Graham, if you've ever watched Pointless or The Chase, and or even Only Connect if you're more sophisticated, and you've been like, oh, this is easy.
Yeah.
When the pressure's on,
you are absolutely convinced there is a book of Didier, a book of Zlatan. You're like, it must be in there somewhere. He did send me a song from Audacious Kids, which basically helps children to learn the books of the Bible.
Great.
So we'll be listening to that in our spare time. Yes. But you are right, our Bible knowledge needs improvement. So we'll be working on that, won't we, Joe?
We will. Anyway, hit me.
Okay, so are you ready?
Please.
Which former prolific big man up top played in European competitions for 2 Premier League clubs, was capped 43 times by his country, and won Oceania Player of the Year in the year 2000?
Well, I'm glad you've chosen a player that was Player of the Year when I was 4 years old, Ed.
Yeah, good, yeah.
Yeah, it's a good start.
We've got to find a way to win this, Joe.
The dark arts at play.
Okay. Do you want me to give you some time to think about it?
Yeah, I'd like that. My initial thoughts is I'm thinking of an Australian player.
Yeah, possibly. Have a think and we can come back to it, Joe.
Well, Ed, it's been quite a windy weekend, hasn't it?
It's been stormy.
Storm Dara was at play this weekend, cancelling the biggest game of the weekend.
If you could put Storm Dara in your FPL team, you did quite well. Genuinely gutted to have missed the Liverpool-Everton game, but we crack on, don't we?
I won't lie, Ed, I'm not.
Why not?
I think it's a bit of as a Liverpool fan, I think it's a bit of a blessing in disguise.
Yeah, going away to Goodison with
60-mile-an-hour winds at Goodison does not sound good.
It was never going to end well for Liverpool, but for a neutral, I was really excited by it.
Well, I can only apologise for that. Do you want to give us a brief EFL roundup?
Yeah, we've got a lot to talk about today, so I'm going to keep this fairly brief. But the big news in the Championship was that Leeds were briefly back on top after beating Derby on Saturday. But then on Sunday, Sheffield United regained top spot after a 2-2 draw with West Brom. Another goal for Tyrese Campbell, who cannot stop scoring for a different red and white striped team that's not Stoke City.
That's a shame, isn't it?
It is.
West Brom have had quite an interesting start to the season, haven't they?
Yeah, 10 draws in their last 11, which is
mediocre at best.
Well, I don't know. You could say consistent.
Yeah.
And that's all we want. Joe,
all we want is consistency.
Sunderland stopped the rot with a late winner at home to Stoke, of course. What?
Sorry, I don't know why I joined in with that.
No, it's good.
Go again.
I liked it. Let's keep it in. Watson scoring twice in a 2-1 win. The late one taking a deflection on its way in, but Frank Lampard will be delighted that he picked up his first win as Coventry boss. 1-0 away at Millwall. Are you broadly cheering Frank Lampard on?
I don't know. I don't know if I have an opinion.
No?
I'm intrigued. I think I'm similarly intrigued with him and Ruud van Nistelrooy as managers to see how they do.
Yeah.
Like we said last week, I don't feel like we know what kind of manager Frank Lampard is, so I think this will be a good barometer.
Well, we'll see how it goes. In League One, it's all getting very tight at the top after Wycombe drew their second game on the bounce, plus wins for Wrexham, Birmingham, Huddersfield and Stockport right below them. There is just 1 point separating the top three at the moment.
Exciting.
So it's very exciting. And in League Two, Walsall won away at leaders Port Vale in the big match to leapfrog them into first place. So all very exciting in League Two. What about in the Premier League, Joe?
Well, a very exciting weekend in the Premier League, actually. It's a lot of goals.
Loads of goals.
Let's start at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium on Sunday.
Yeah, this was the big entertaining game, wasn't it?
We all knew this was going to be a bit of a belter.
Yeah, well, I made the mistake of forgetting it was happening and then checking the score after 15 minutes and going, oh yeah, that's the thing, and having missed 3 goals already, which I was...
And it's important not to use the word Spursy here, Ed.
Yeah.
But it was a little bit Spursy, wasn't it?
Yeah, I feel sorry for Ange. Again, he's just, bless him, coming across like the dad that is fed up of picking up after his own kids. He is constantly annoyed.
I think he's kind of set himself up for a bit of a fail this season. He did this interview at the start of the season where he said, I always win things in my second season.
Yeah.
It's not looking good.
Yeah, feels a bit like it was tempting fate, possibly. And I thought, Spurs, I thought they gave a good account of themselves, but I think equally to throw it away like that, that their fans expect more.
They do, and you have to say Chelsea look really good.
They do.
Are they in the title race?
Well, I think so. And what I would say is I definitely didn't agree with a certain host of this podcast when he said that in
it's interesting,
September. Yeah. So Joe Rivers being the Nostradamus of the footballing world.
Well, thank you very much. I think the thing about Chelsea is I do think they're in the title race. And I think if you compare them to Liverpool, City and Arsenal, which we'll come on to in a minute, all of them are kind of hampered by injuries to big players.
Yeah.
You look at Liverpool, Alisson's out, Jota's out, and there's been a few. Conor Bradley's out, Trent was out for a bit. You look at Arsenal, they've had quite a few injuries at the back. Gabriel was missing at the weekend. You look at City, obviously the big one is Rodri.
Yeah.
If you look at Chelsea, maybe barring Cole Palmer, you can't say that if a specific player gets injured, they're going to be drastically affected.
Yeah, they have so much looking good going forward, particularly, don't they?
I think every player is replaceable in that squad in a good way.
Yeah.
That they've gone after this thing of having 2 players for every position.
Yeah.
Even if Cole Palmer gets injured, I think you can bring someone in who will do a good job.
The thing with Chelsea as well is that they're innovative. They're always looking to change things up. Mark Cucurella, for example, decided what would happen if he wore slippers in the first 10 minutes of this game.
That was brilliant. And absolutely brilliant.
Yeah, exactly. And, look, didn't work. they'll try with regular boots next time. You know?
I just love that immediately after the second goal, he sprints to the bench. He's berating the kit man.
Yeah, like it's his fault.
It's so funny.
Yeah.
Absolutely brilliant. Moving on to Manchester United, Ed.
Yeah, you've got it. You've got that smile on your face as well. United losing at home to Nottingham Forest.
Oh, I just feel sympathy now, Ed.
Do
I'm
you?
afraid. No, I don't.
Okay, fair enough.
This was another great game in the midst of Storm Dara.
Yeah.
The wind was blowing everyone about, blowing Andre Onana around as well.
Yeah, it wasn't a great piece of goalkeeping. Gibbs White's hit the shot and the ball moved a bit, but actually it just more looked like Onana just sort of collapsed and then just didn't bother. A bit like me in five-a-side.
Very strange one. I think this week's big man up top of the week will again go to Chris Wood.
Yes, exactly.
Becoming Nottingham Forest's all-time top scorer in the Premier League with 25 goals.
We should just make him big man up top of the season. Yeah. Let's do it.
Absolutely.
Obviously, there's things going on behind the scenes at United, isn't there?
Yeah, I think it seems strange. The Amorim coming in seems to have given such a confidence boost, and like even in this game, you can see what he's trying to do. There's a plan moving forward, but it just seems to be one step forward, two steps backwards for United off the pitch, and this has been a recurring theme, particularly the last couple of years. And it was announced on Sunday that their sporting director, Dan Ashworth, is leaving the club after only joining 4 months ago. You know, he's a really sought-after sporting director last season. He was at Newcastle. Manchester United, after the takeover, really wanted him. He was a really reputable sporting director. So they paid a lot of money for him. He was put on gardening leave for 4 months at Newcastle United before he joined Manchester United. And it's only lasted 4 months. And there's talk that there's been some quite big disagreements with Omar Barada over who the new manager should have been. Dan Ashworth came in and was like, I want a proven Premier League manager or Gareth Southgate.
Yeah.
Neither of which happened.
He wanted Steve Bruce.
Don't we all want Steve Bruce at United? Yes, please. Instead, they brought in Ruben Amorim, who's a young coach who's never managed in the Premier League before. So it hasn't worked, and they've moved on. And I think what strikes me about this, it must be so frustrating to be a United fan. I think they've paid reportedly £10 million to get rid of Ten Hag. They've paid a lot of money to get Dan Ashworth. They've probably paid him a lot of money to get rid of him as well. And going back to last week, they've put ticket prices up and they're making lots of redundancies within the club. And you're just a bit like, this isn't adding up.
No.
You know, you're spending a lot of money elsewhere, yet we're having to pay more money.
Back to that point again of fans don't mind paying money if they know it's going in the right place.
Absolutely.
And actually, you know, your child's £66 ticket.
Yeah.
What's that money going to? It's basically going to pay Dan Ashworth's severance package.
Yeah, and that must be so frustrating.
Very frustrating, absolutely. Speaking of former United managers, Ruud van Nistelrooy,
yes.
who I wanted to make a joke about Leicester being in rude health. They're not quite there yet, but they've had some exciting early times, and they found themselves getting a point at home to Brighton. Despite being second best for most of the game, it's one of those draws that will feel like a win. They were 2-0 down with 3 minutes to go, and they got a 2-2 draw. Jamie
Vardy looking peak 2016.
Exactly.
Well.
And who doesn't want that?
Well, you love to see it. Yeah, they're looking really invigorated under Ruud van Nistelrooy and his turtleneck.
Yes.
And yeah, just a really, really entertaining game. You know, Brighton were leading 2-0 until the very end, and who saw this coming?
No, exactly. Speaking of who saw something coming, it's the El Sacco tonight, Monday night, as we record this on Monday afternoon.
Yes, shall we do our usual prediction thing for a game that's already happened?
Yeah, let's do that. Tell me about El Sacco.
Well, tonight is El Sacco, Ed.
What is that?
This is where two under-pressure managers come together. They play against each other, and essentially whoever loses is going to get sacked.
What are your thoughts then?
Well, I actually do think if West Ham lose, Lopetegui's off. I think it's quite clear that's going to happen. If Wolves lose, I'm less confident that Gary O'Neill will be sacked, but I still think he's seriously under pressure. So I think it's going to be a real ding-dong.
And if there's a draw, maybe they'll both go.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, this is on Monday night. I think it's going to be like a 3-3, actually, Ed.
Do you?
Yeah. Do you not?
No, I think 1-0 Wolves win. And
Craig Dawson header.
Yeah, exactly.
Fine.
And Lopetegui gets the boot. Arsenal and City dropping points this weekend. I feel like it's City, that they're sort of not fully out of this slump yet, are they? Haaland scoring, which is always a good thing, and maybe that'll sort of perk them up a bit. But I think too early to really comment. Give them a couple of games and then we can comment about whether they're out of it or not.
Well, I think so. I think there was some promising signs against Forest in midweek. They won 3-0. But even at 1-0 up, Forest winger Jota Silva had a chance to make it 1-1. And you have to think if that had gone in, I think there would have been a bit of a meltdown at City. And I think they're just in this period of what's going on. Pep's trying things. They're not working. He's not used to that. So, yeah, we'll see. We'll see what happens.
See how it goes. Brentford 4, Newcastle 2, which was a really exciting first half.
It was. In the most predictable scoreline of the whole weekend, I think. Brentford are high-flying at home. Newcastle seemed to play really well against big teams, not very well against smaller teams.
Yeah.
And, again, a high-scoring game.
A high-scoring game. Newcastle, for me, feel like a team that have stalled. And it's that thing of there will be the conversations if they can't turn this around quite quickly about Eddie Howe, I think.
Yeah.
End of January, if they've not managed to string a few wins together, I think those questions will come.
I think they're going to lose patience quite quickly, particularly the amount of money that the owners are pumping into the club. I think they would have expected a lot more results by now.
Yeah.
They're still seen on this upward trajectory, but I think they're going a bit stale. You know.
And I think this actually brings me to something I wanted to raise, which was about the state of the Premier League table this year. And I say state because that sounds like it's a mess.
It's an absolute state.
No, well, this is it. I think it's actually really great. You've got these four teams at the top, Liverpool, Chelsea, Arsenal, City, and we would sort of all broadly call them the top four, wouldn't we?
Yeah.
They're all sort of a tier above, doing quite well. Obviously, City, we've talked about their problems. But then I think in previous years, you would then get this sort of smaller sort of cohort of clubs that are maybe pushing for Europa League, maybe have a good year and get in the Champions League. The likes of Spurs, Villa, maybe back in the day would have been Everton, that would have been up there. But what you've now got is this huge swath of clubs that are sort of in that second tier, from Nottingham Forest in 5th on 25 points. You've then got Villa on the same points, Brighton and Bournemouth a point behind them, Brentford and Fulham a point behind them in 9th and 10th, and then you've got Spurs, Newcastle, Man United in 11th, 12th and 13th. And you're sort of looking like, wow, that's quite a lot of teams in just a few spaces, a few points separating them. And actually, if any of those put a decent run of form together, and a few will over Christmas, then you could have one of those sort of really exciting but not expected teams doing quite well and getting European football next year.
Yeah, I think so. And I think you even look at Aston Villa. They're not on a good run at the moment, but they win one game at the weekend and they're up to 6th in contention. So, yeah, it's really exciting. I think the table's going to look very different in a month's time.
There's been a lot of goals, and again, I think this comes back down to the way teams are playing, and I mean this in a derogatory way, is that because of all the passing it out from the back, there are so many goals every week that are completely avoidable.
Yeah.
And what that means is that anybody can beat anybody. And so I think it's a couple of those teams shoring things up at the back, and they could start to motor on a bit, but it makes it very interesting.
It does indeed, yes. So, Ed, this week we wanted to have a conversation around probably the biggest story of last week, the Marc Guéhi rainbow armband story. And so much has happened in football since then. It's so easy for us to just move on, isn't it? But I think we felt it was really important to discuss this, didn't we?
Yeah, especially here. This story broke as we were recording last week's episode. So it felt like, we're going to be a little bit behind the curve on this one. But I think it's one of those that, it's been dealt with in the football news. And for us, we're still very much talking about it. This is a key, important conversation to have, particularly as people of faith. And so we thought, well, let's do it, even if we are a few days behind.
Well, exactly. And I
cycle.
think that's the point of this podcast. This is what we're trying to do.
Yeah.
I think Christians are actually looking for a Christian perspective on this. And I'm not saying that we are here to provide all the answers, but I think we want to create a space where we can discuss it. So if you missed this story, Ed, do you want to provide, maybe if we look at what are the facts of this story?
Yeah, sure. So this was all about the Rainbow Laces campaign, which is a week in Premier League football that's an initiative on behalf of LGBTQ plus charity Stonewall to support inclusion in football. So it encompassed the fixtures last weekend, so not the weekend just gone, but the one before, and the midweek games that followed that. So there were sort of 2 matches over this period. And during those games, there was a big focus on equality, diversity and inclusion, but there were several visual displays of support. Players were invited to wear rainbow laces on their boots. The corner flags at all Premier League games were replaced with rainbow corner flags. And crucially, and this is where the issue lies, all captains were asked to wear rainbow armbands. They weren't mandated. They were asked. They were invited to wear them. Encouraged. Now, on the Saturday, all bar one captain wore a rainbow armband. That was Ipswich captain Sam Morsi, who is a practicing Muslim. He declined to wear one on the grounds of his faith. And it's fair to say he did receive some backlash, but he had the support of his club, Ipswich Town, who said that he had the right not to wear one if he didn't want to. However, one player who's very much been at the centre of this story was Crystal Palace captain and England defender Marc Guéhi, who has spoken about his faith very publicly in the past and decided to wear the rainbow armband on Saturday, but also to write the message, "I love Jesus," on the armband as well. Now, it is worth pointing out at this point that Marc Guéhi did break an official FA rule here.
Yeah.
So this is Rule A4, which states that the appearance of any religious messaging on clothing, boots or other equipment is banned. The FA opted to merely remind Marc Guéhi and his club, Crystal Palace, of the regulations. And then the following Tuesday evening, when Crystal Palace faced Ipswich Town, Guéhi again appeared wearing the rainbow armband, but this time with the message, "Jesus loves you," written across it. So he's very much doubled down on his message. Also in that game, Ipswich Town captain Sam Morsi, for the second time, declined to wear it again, citing his religious beliefs as a Muslim. Since this second breach, the FA opted to not charge Marc Guéhi, but to, again, remind him of the rules, which very much feels like the pragmatic, diplomatic, let's try and ignore this until next year
I think
approach.
it's kind of like trying to keep both sides happy, isn't it?
Yeah, very much so. Mark did break his silence on the matter later in the week, saying, "I think this message was pretty clear, to be honest. It was a message of love, of truth as well, a message of inclusivity, so I think it speaks for itself." Now, with that comment, I feel like he's not exactly nailed his colours to the mast either. There's still bits in the air. So what we don't know is, from Marc Guéhi, that message that he wrote on, was it a protest against feeling like he was made to wear the rainbow armband? Was he simply trying to say, I can support LGBT inclusion and love Jesus at the same time, and that's okay? We don't really know that.
No.
So I think a lot of what we're going to be talking about is we're sort of picking at the bones here and trying to figure out what people are thinking and saying.
Absolutely. It's a hard one to navigate, and I think we're all just trying to...
Well, I think we're trying to do our best, and what I hope our listeners will do is give us the grace to have a go at this and fail, because we might do.
Yeah.
So what are your sort of initial thoughts? Because I think what I would say is, we were talking about the facts. We do know Marc Guéhi has broken a rule.
Yeah.
We also know as well that there is a great deal of discrimination in the game, particularly around LGBT issues.
Absolutely. I think it is a fact that homophobia is a very live issue in football still. Yeah. Only last month, Tottenham were charged because their fans were heard using language with an implied reference towards sexual orientation. So that's to do with some of the things they were chanting were perceived as homophobic in November. So that's a month ago. And they were charged for that. It was only until January 2023 that the FA added homophobic chanting to its list of rules breaches. So this is an ongoing issue.
And I think there's many reasons why that might be, but I think probably fairly high up that list is that, well, if a high-profile player comes out as gay, they are going to be subject to abuse from the stands.
Yeah.
Players are already subjected to a lot of criticism from the stands just based on how they play, but also just based on what their haircut is or what story they've been in on the front pages. Anything that fans can use against a player to put them off, they will do. And so I think it's fair to say that there are very likely players in the Premier League who are gay and not expressing this to even their teammates maybe, or it might be a secret within dressing rooms. But I think that there's a real sense of, if I come out publicly whilst I'm still playing, this is going to cause an issue for me.
Yeah.
I've been to games recently and I've heard homophobic things chanted. You kind of go, oh, well, yeah, it's just sort of part of the game, isn't it? And you kind of try and pretend it's not really happening, but it is. And so for gay people in the stands and on the pitch, it's fair to say that football stadiums are not always the most welcoming and respectful of atmospheres.
No, 100%. And that's what this movement is about, is promoting inclusion of the LGBTQ plus community within football. And you're right, not just players, fans as well, and people who work in and around football. This is a real live issue and one that we need to talk about.
And I think, like, coming to the sort of the Christian perspective straight away, wherever you stand on this issue, I think we can surely all agree that what we want is for society is to be a space where people can feel, at the very least, not discriminated against, not
100%.
abused, and safe.
100%.
Just like we would hope that anybody could walk into a church and feel not abused, not discriminated against, and safe. That's sort of like step one, isn't it?
Yeah.
And so that's, I think, what we're hoping to be the case in football stadiums as well. That said, there are very valid reasons why a player might find it really challenging to wear a rainbow armband. We were talking about Sam Morsi, and for Muslims in particular who are from a foreign country, they may be originally from very conservative Muslim backgrounds, where if they speak up on this, and wearing a rainbow armband may be seen as speaking up on this, they may put themselves in danger. They may put their family members and friends back home in danger. So there's a very legitimate reason why somebody might want to do it on that. And also, just if this doesn't fit in with a player's religious beliefs, that feels like a valid reason to not wear one.
Yeah,
absolutely. To me.
And I also think what you have to think about with this is that these are the captains of a football club. This isn't just an individual decision.
Yeah.
They're also representing their club in this situation. So it's a really hard tension, especially if you are wanting to make a statement with your faith. I think particularly you think about Crystal Palace here. They have a lot of Christian players.
Yeah.
And obviously we love to see that. You've got Marc Guéhi, you've got Ebery Eze, you've got Maxime Lacroix, you've got Trevor Chalobah, and Joel Ward in the past as well. There's a real faith movement going on there. So I think that adds a bit of a layer here to the story.
Do you think, and this is one of the questions that we're having, is should players be allowed to express their religious beliefs on their kit? That's one question. Is that rule a good rule or not a good rule? Because I can totally understand why the FA may think, we don't want people writing messages or slogans on their kit. That's fair enough. But also a lot of people are saying, good on you, Marc Guéhi, for expressing your beliefs and standing by it. I would add as well, actually, this isn't just Christians that are saying good on you, Marc Guéhi, as well. There are non-Christians or people who, we don't know their faith saying it as well. I don't know if you saw the clip of Ali McCoist.
No.
We all love Ali McCoist.
Yeah, national treasure.
National treasure. Now, he told TalkSport, because they were having a conversation about this, he said, I don't think you ask people to do things they're not comfortable with or don't believe in. I think it should be up to the individual to tell you the truth. The irony in Marc Guéhi potentially having to face the breaks for wearing something that says, I love Jesus. I said yesterday, Jesus is the most tolerant being that has ever walked this earth. So the irony of that whole thing isn't lost on me at all. So Ali McCoist, as far as we know, not Christian, but is a well-loved pundit talking to TalkSport, and he very much thinks, as long as it's not a message that is negative, and I think we'd all agree it's not a negative message, shouldn't he be allowed to do that?
It's such a tension, isn't it? And I think you have two completely different responses here, don't you? I think it's interesting. It's also interesting that Ipswich played Crystal Palace in this week. You have the response of the Ipswich captain that chose to not wear it at all, and there's been no noise around him expressing an opinion. His manager's come out and made a statement. And then you have Marc Guéhi who said, I am going to wear this, but I'm also going to make a statement. So that's two polar opposite responses to this issue. And we wanted to get an outside voice on this conversation, didn't we, about this whole thing of players being asked to wear things or to make statements.
Yeah, so we spoke to Christian Wienkamp, who works for Sports Chaplaincy UK. He's also the chaplain at West Brom. He's one of the members of staff who gets closest to these players and has these conversations with them. He really wanted to strongly remind us that chaplains are not paid by the club.
Yeah, I didn't know this before this interview.
So they're invited into clubs to have these conversations with players, but they're not a paid member of the staff.
So they're almost like independent people.
Yes.
Yeah.
Which means that they can have conversations in a way that's a bit separate, and that actually works in their favour a lot of the time. So we asked Christian how he as a chaplain would look at a situation like this. Hello, Christian Wienkamp. Welcome to the big man up top. How are you doing?
Thank you so much for having me. I am well, and it's good to be with you.
Superb. Well, we wanted to touch on the Marc Guéhi story because obviously that's been one that's been really in the press of recent sort of days. I just wanted to get a sense from you, how does it work in terms of, from a chaplain's perspective, when a player, let's say, has an issue with something that they're expected to wear, or, you know, maybe it's a warm-up T-shirt, or it could even be a poppy for Remembrance Sunday. How do you, as a chaplain, how are you involved in those situations and conversations?
Yeah, I don't think it'd be different to any other conversation, really. We're not there as chaplains to voice our political stance or stance on any other issue. We're just there to be a non-judgmental, confidential listening ear. So if a player wanted to highlight something or emphasize something or voice something, we just sit there and listen to their thoughts about it, and maybe not give a solution, maybe not give an answer, but okay, tell me more about this. Why would you like to do that? Or where's this come from? Or who are the other voices in your life speaking over you? And just coming to a place where maybe they make a decision in their own mind, and whether we think it's the right decision or the wrong decision is not about making their decisions for them. It's about listening to them. And then if it all goes south, them sitting down with them afterwards as well, and just understanding the implications of it and everything like that, but not voicing what we'd say or what we'd do ourselves.
And this sort of asking to speak on the issue more broadly, but do you think players are maybe sort of asked to comment or sort of speak on issues by wearing things like poppies or warm-up T-shirts or whatever it may be? Do you think that's something that's sort of broadly accepted by players, or is it just passively, well, I've got to wear this week, or what's your sort of inside perspective on that?
Yeah, it's potentially changed. Take it back 15, 20 years ago. I think with social media now, everyone has a say, everyone has an opinion, and everyone's going to jump on the back of anything someone says. And again, we take it back to someone's workplace. They're doing a job and they're being asked to make a stance or promote something. I just question, where's the support if someone doesn't want to do something, or if someone has a different stance or a different perspective, are they being listened to as well? Because is a question about being forced to do something, or have you actually got your own stance that you want to promote as well? I don't know. It's a really tough one. And with social media, with so many opinions now, it's so hard to make a stance, and it's so hard to say what you want to say, or for a club to demand that people all go down the same line. It's whatever happens, someone's got an opinion about it, and it's going to blow up, and it's going to be really difficult.
And I suppose some clubs are having really great conversations about all sorts of things behind the scenes. Or do you think that is something that, like you say, we don't have time for this, we need to just crack on and worry about set piece routines or whatever it may be?
Yeah, I think conversations are key, aren't they? It's communication. With all of this, I think communication is key. And if you can have conversations about what's trying to be communicated, that can only be a healthy, good thing. Conversation has to happen, and understanding each other and understanding where each other's coming from and what good can come from those conversations. That I think clubs are better at that. They have to be better at that, and I think they will continue to be better at that. That's my hope.
And just finally, one last question on this is for players like Marc Guéhi or Sam Morsi, who both, I suppose, in some way made a stand. Again, lots of things are unclear, but they tried to make a statement themselves in their actions. What would you say to them, and how you hope the clubs are treating them, and how you hope the fans are treating them in this situation? Because they've come under quite a lot of criticism, I think it's fair to say.
Yeah, again, we go back to conversations. I think that is a key learning. Understanding where the players are coming from, understanding from the players' perspective, maybe a wider conversation as well. I think Players want to be listened to as well, just like anyone in the workplace. We want to be heard, and we don't want to just be told to do something without actually understanding. But it's about learning, isn't it? And about learning where each and every person is coming from without judgment, based on respect, and we're all able to learn, but also be able to stand on our foundational beliefs and our faiths and what's important to us.
Amazing stuff. Christian Wienkamp, thank you so much for joining us today.
So one of the key things that Christian spoke about was having a conversation around this. That conversation is key around these issues. And I think that is part of the problem here. You know, these players are wearing armbands, putting statements out, and we're not hearing any dialogue around it, which leaves room to read into it.
Absolutely, which is exactly what we're doing.
Exactly, yeah. And it's a problem because we're getting no clarity from either side.
Yeah.
Guéhi has put out a statement, and I think it's fair to say it's not brought out much clarification.
No.
You know, we don't need to know the ins and outs of what his opinions are, but the problem is there's so much space being left open to interpretation.
Yeah.
And add social media into that, it just creates quite a toxic place of opinion.
Yeah, and I think as well it's that thing of whether it is just a cryptic Instagram post or whether it's wearing an armband, it's that thing of just shouting statements rather than having conversations. That was the thing that we should be doing more, is having these open and honest conversations. But I'm sure people will take this conversation that we're having, Joe, and we'll say, oh, right, well, that means X, Y, and Z.
Exactly.
And actually, this is a much more complex issue, I think, than people would like it to be.
Yeah, and we live in a society where people look at the headline, right? You find a clip, you find a quote, you can make it what you want, essentially, and that's dangerous.
Crystal Palace, on their shirts, have an internet gambling company. One could argue that basically Marc Guéhi and the rest of his Crystal Palace team are being asked to make a statement every week. They're essentially wearing an advert for a betting company.
Yeah.
And so are they then making a statement on gambling and what that is? And also, you know, because some have said of Marc Guéhi, well, he's been wearing this message for all this time. Why is he only choosing to stand up about the LGBT issue rather than making a stand on other problems as well?
I think it goes both ways. What's difficult here is that no one was forced to wear this armband.
Yeah.
But they were encouraged to. But at the same time, we're in a society where if you don't take up that offer, you are seen to be turning your back on it.
Yeah. There's pressure, isn't there?
Yeah, exactly. There is. And again, it comes back to the whole there's no dialogue around it. I think he's just in such a difficult position there. I think either he doesn't wear the armband, he gets stick. He wears the armband and there's no message on it, he gets stick. Maybe from Christians and from people he knows. He's chosen to write the statement on the armband, which I think it's a real statement. I think it's unfair to almost expect that of someone.
And I think, like, again, it's coming back to this thing of footballers as role models, isn't it? Some players, they don't like the idea of being a role model. Whereas some could argue he signed up for it. He signed up to be a role model when you put on your first pair of boots. Yeah. Because I'm not asked to make a statement when I come into work. You know, I'm just here doing my job and all that sort of stuff. What would happen if I was asked to do that? I don't really know. There are so many other types of statements that players are asked to do. Statements around racism, statements, even things like wearing the poppy in November. And again, we could talk of James McLean and Nemanja Matic, who famously didn't want to wear the poppy. Players are being asked to make more and more statements about all sorts of things, aren't they?
I actually think the Mazraoui story is really interesting here.
So tell us about that.
Yeah, so if you haven't seen this story, so Manchester United were going to do a similar statement alongside the Stonewall campaign. They were going to wear kind of rainbow tracksuits in the warm-up. He didn't want to wear the tracksuit, very much in the same way that Sam Morsi didn't. So then the whole team decided not to wear the tracksuit because they were worried that this would single out Mazraoui and he would get a lot of abuse for it.
Yeah.
I think that's really interesting because that's kind of a whole team getting behind someone. No doubt there's different views and beliefs in that team, but they've put that to the side and they've all collectively decided not to single out someone. I think that really helps with the whole statement conversation, that this isn't someone doing it on their own.
Yeah. with all of this is a really complex issue. It's a really thorny issue. I suppose we have to look to the Bible, don't we, Joe?
Probably should. Yeah.
There's two in Romans which are really jumping out at me. Romans 14 says, "As for the one who is weak in faith, welcome him, but not to quarrel over opinions." Now, this is specifically referring to people back in the day who decided to eat meat, or some people decided just to eat vegetables. Some were they were also talking about how one person believed that one day of the week was better than the other, and others thought that all days were the same. And basically, Paul in Romans is saying, just look, people will have different opinions. You should let their faith play out as it plays out. Now, 2 chapters before then, in Romans 12, he says, "I appeal to you, therefore, brothers, by the mercies of God, to present your bodies as a living sacrifice. Do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewal of your mind, that by testing you may discern what is the will of God, what is good and acceptable and perfect." And so that feels very much like he's saying, don't be conformed to this world. Don't follow what the world is saying. Don't go with the flow, as my youth pastor in the late 90s would have said. It's this thing of, are we to not quarrel over differences of opinion, or are we to stand strong in our beliefs and not to compromise? Yeah, it's a tricky one.
It is. And I hear that, don't conform to the world. And I think you initially hear that and you're like, do the opposite. Of what the world says. I don't think that's necessarily true. I think what Marc Guéhi's tried to do here is he's worn the armband, hasn't he?
Yeah.
But at the same time, he's tried to portray his message. So you could say he has conformed in a way, but he's had a conversation around it to try and stand out, I guess, and stand firm in his faith.
Yeah, and I think ultimately the thing that worries me slightly is that this issue will rumble on.
Absolutely.
The FA's response has very much just pushed this under the rug.
It's not dealt with it.
Let's deal with this in another, 11 and a half months.
Well, yeah, this is going to come back round in a year's time. Let's hope no one does anything. Yeah, is essentially what they're doing.
But let's be honest, Marc Guéhi is likely going to still be a captain, if not at Palace somewhere. He's a leader and seems like a good man wherever he goes. And that is something to bear in mind, is the statement he has made is going to potentially affect him. Some clubs may think, okay, we don't want this every November, and maybe back away from it. So it is a sacrifice that Marc has done to stand up for what he believes. But I think, the biggest thing for me is that we ask these players to make statements, and then when it all blows up, we just think, let's just ignore it until next year. And then this is all going to happen again in 12 months' time, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay, Joe, we're back to the quiz. Bible Ballers. Have you had a think about it?
Would you mind repeating the question for me, Ed?
Of course. Which former prolific big man up top played in European competitions for 2 Premier League clubs, was capped 43 times by his country, and won Oceania Player of the Year in 2000?
I think we're looking at an Australian player.
Okay.
I'm choosing between Tim Cahill and Mark Viduka here.
Okay.
I'd call both of them prolific. I'd call both of them big men up top. I think Mark Viduka played in the UEFA Cup with Newcastle and Middlesbrough, maybe. This is where my thoughts are going. So I'm going to lock in Mark Viduka, if you don't mind.
Well, you are correct, Joe. Well done. Yes. Former prolific big man up top, and he's 6'2", shorter than I thought.
Yeah, you'd think taller, wouldn't you?
But prolific, 202 goals in 409 games.
It's not bad, is it?
Basically 1 in 2, which is amazing. Can I tell you my little Mark Viduka fact, Joe?
No, please do.
So he, earlier on in his career, before he came to the UK, he played for Dinamo Zagreb in Croatia.
Okay.
And that's where he lives now, where he owns a coffee shop and enjoys making coffee.
Well, you'd hope so if he owns a coffee shop.
Well, yes, but he's a bit of a barista. I love that. I love that. And here's my even better Mark Viduka fact. So his link with Croatia actually goes back in his family from before he was born. And Croatian footballer and Ballon d'Or winner Luka Modric is his cousin.
No.
Yes.
Really?
Isn't that a great fact?
Oh, brilliant.
Yeah. So Mark Viduka, Luka Modric, cousins. Who would have
They
thought?
have Christmas together. Special.
Exactly. But yes, there we go. Mark Viduka, excellent big man up top.
Well, what a way to end the podcast, Ed.
Yes, I think so too. Thank you for listening to the Big Man Up Top this week. If you want to get in touch with the show, please send us an email to podcasts@ucb.co.uk. Please follow, subscribe, give us all the good reviews and that sort of stuff, and that'll help us get the word out. Also, if you've enjoyed this, make sure you tell your friends. A huge thank you to our producer Anthony for all his hard work behind the scenes. And there will be a new episode next week on Tuesday, won't there, Joe?
There will, Ed, yes.
See you next week, Joe.
See you.